The winter night lay over the Ardennes, like a lid pressed against a pot about to boil. It was December 1944, and the cold northern Bastogne did not simply bite. It settled into bones, filled lungs, and made every breath feel like dragging in shards of glass. Fog rolled low along the swampy ground, swirling between crooked pines and half-frozen puddles. The distant thump of artillery echoed without rhythm, as if the sky itself were murmuring warnings no one cared to translate anymore. Andrew Keller marched at the rear of the column, boots sinking into mud that pulled at each step. He carried the same pack as every other man, but on him everything looked heavier. The rifle, the gear, even the straps seemed to cut deeper into his thin shoulders. The guilt he carried was invisible, but it was the heaviest load of all. His brother's face still flickered the edge of every thought. Sunburned skin, tired smile, the half-sarcastic salute before shipping out to the Pacific. The telegram had arrived 3 months earlier, but the wound inside Andrew felt as fresh as that morning's frost. The squad ahead trudged with stiff mechanical fatigue, breath-forming pale ghosts that vanished too quickly. Men muttered curses about the terrain, the cold, the Germans, the officers, anything to push their minds away from the fear that lingered behind every root and shadow. Andrew did not complain. He rarely did. To most of them, he was a kid engineer, useful for repairs and menial tasks. Someone who followed orders without question. Useful but forgettable. Sergeant Doyle walked near the front, jaw clenched, scanning the fog-shrouded swamp as if it was a supply route into existence. Time was their enemy more than anything else. A cut-off company waited miles away, nearly out of ammunition. If this path wasn't clear before dawn, good men would die, and those deaths would be carried by every soldier here. The land around them looked wrong. Too smooth in some places, too flat in others. No churned soil from shell impacts, no frozen footprints from German patrols. Andrew felt a tension ripple through him as he studied the ground. He had learned, since childhood, to sense metal the way others sense a shift in the wind. It was a strange gift born from afternoons in his father's scrapyard, tapping pipes and broken machine parts just to hear the different voices trapped inside them. Tonight, something beneath the soil seemed to hum a quiet, ominous note only he could detect. He slowed his steps, let his eyes trace the clearing ahead. The soil was too firm near a cluster of low shrubs, while the area to the left felt strangely hollow beneath the thin crust of frozen earth. He swallowed hard. Rumors had been circling for days about new German mine belts. Rush work, hurriedly placed, but deadly all the same. He wanted to speak up, but the memory of being dismissed earlier in the campaign pressed against his throat. Doyle had little patience for hunches, even less for hunches coming from a 19-year-old who still wrote letters to his mother twice a week. Then the sergeant lifted a fist, signaling a halt. The men spread slightly, lowering themselves into crouches as they scanned the area. Doyle's voice cut through the fog, cold and edged with urgency. "We're losing time. Route should cut through that clearing. Move on my mark." Andrew's stomach twisted. Something in the earth's silence felt wrong. Wrong in the way a locked door felt when someone was hiding behind it. He looked again at the flat expanse of mud ahead. Too perfect. Too untouched. He imagined a chain of mines buried shallow, waiting for the weight of a single boot to wake them. He inhaled, tasting cold iron in the air. He couldn't stay silent. Not again. Not with another life at stake. He wiped his glove against his coat, stepped forward, and cleared his throat. "Sergeant, the ground up there doesn't sound right." Doyle turned, annoyance already forming in his expression, and the night seemed to hold its breath. Sergeant Doyle's glare sliced through the fog. His breath steamed in short, irritated bursts as he studied Andrew, as if deciding whether the interruption was worth the precious seconds slipping away. Behind him, the other soldiers shifted uneasily, boots sinking deeper into the swampy mix of mud and frost. No one wanted to linger in this clearing. No one wanted to debate a recruit's intuition when a whole company depended on them. "What do you mean the ground doesn't sound right?" Doyle asked, voice low but sharp. Andrew felt a familiar surge of doubt claw at his chest. He knew how absurd his warning must have sounded. The others were already exchanging looks, some mocking, some impatient, some simply exhausted. He wished for a moment he could shove the words back down his throat. But the instinct that flickered inside him earlier now throbbed like a pulse. He pointed at the smooth patch of earth. "It's too even, Sergeant. No shell hits, no tracks. And the frost settles different over metal. The soil there, it's hiding something." Doyle snorted. "You a geologist now, Keller?" "No, sir. Just trust me. Please." A murmur rippled through the squad. They all felt the weight of the sergeant's temper. Doyle was not cruel, but he embodied the rigid confidence of a man for whom hesitation meant casualties. He had lost half a platoon earlier, that year clearing a road that turned out to be booby-trapped. Since then, he relied heavily on experience, procedure, and the clock, never on intuition, especially not someone else's. For a long moment, only the distant artillery answered. Then Private Huxley, older and usually quiet, stepped forward. "Sarge, kid's not usually wrong about the little stuff. Fixed my detonator last week just by shaking it near his ear." He shrugged awkwardly. Maybe he hears something we don't. Doyle turned his glare on Huxley, but the comment lingered. His jaw shifted side to side, a sign he was thinking, fast and reluctantly. The pressure in the air felt physical. The fog seemed to thicken, curling low as if crouching alongside the men waiting. Finally, the sergeant exhaled. "Fine. Keller, show me." Andrew's heart hammered. Relief mixed with fear. Fear because now he had to prove himself. The consequences of being wrong were unthinkable. He knelt, scanning the ground, letting muscle memory guide him. The world narrowed to the frost, the mud, the slight crust of frozen earth that glimmered faintly in the weak moonlight. He needed something metal, something small, hollow enough to resonate. He fumbled on his belt, fingers closing around the dented steel of his mess tin. His father's final gift before he shipped out. A strange pang hit him. He remembered tapping it as a child, listening to the soft echo it made when pressed against different surfaces. He flattened himself on the ground, placing the tin's edge lightly against the soil. The cold seeped through his gloves. He tapped once with the wooden handle of his entrenching tool. The vibration traveled up the metal, into his palm, into his wrist, subtle, muted, wrong. He shifted one foot to the left. Tapped again. A different tone. Fuller, deeper, solid earth underneath. He swallowed. His breath trembled in the air. "There's something under here," he whispered, "and not far down." Doyle crouched beside him, skepticism fading as he watched the careful rhythm of Andrew's movements. The other men leaned forward, their usual chatter replaced by taut focus. Andrew moved inch by inch, tapping, listening, following faint changes in tone no one else could detect. He wasn't sure how he heard it, whether through the tin, through his fingers, or inside his bones. But the pattern grew clearer. Patches of deadened vibration formed a crooked line beneath the surface, a path of unnatural silence. A mine belt, newly set, shallow. "Holy hell," Huxley breathed. Doyle's face hardened, not in anger, but in realization. If they had advanced on his mark, the entire squad could have vanished in an eruption no one in the rear lines would ever understand. The sergeant rose slowly. "Nobody moves," he ordered quietly. "Keller, keep going." Andrew felt an unexpected warm swell in his chest. Not pride, but purpose. For the first time since his brother's death, he felt he was doing something that mattered, something that could save someone instead of losing them. He pressed the tin to the earth again. Tap. Listen. Move. The fog seemed to part around him as he inched forward, mapping danger one heartbeat at a time. And somewhere in the dense forest beyond the clearing, a faint rustle hinted that the Germans were not as far away as they had hoped. The fog drifted in restless waves, folding and unfolding like a living thing. Andrew lay flat against the frozen earth, the cold seeping through his coat until it felt like part of his bloodstream. His breath came in slow streams, each exhale trembling as it left him. The squad kept their distance, forming a wide crescent behind him. Every man frozen in a half-crouch, rifles raised not toward the ground, but toward the black tree line where faint sounds whispered through the branches. Andrew steadied his hand and tapped his mess tin again. The vibration crawled through the thin metal and into his wrist, dull and suffocated. A buried object. He marked it with a thin scratch of his bayonet. careful not to disturb the soil itself. He shifted right. Tap. A clean tone, full and unbroken. Safe earth. He moved like a slow, deliberate tide, charting a zigzag that only he could decipher. Each tap echoed inside him with a frightening clarity, as if his heartbeat synced with the earth's hidden dangers. The pressure of the squad's survival pressed down on him as tangibly as a cold. He felt it in their silence, in the way their boots remained perfectly still, in the way Doyle's shadow hovered just close enough to watch him, but not close enough to interfere. A crow called from the pines, sharp, sudden. Several rifles snapped toward the sound. The tension hung taut, ready to snap. "You hearing anything, Keller?" Doyle asked quietly, his voice pitched low to avoid carrying across the clearing. "Yes, sir," Andrew whispered. "There's a chain of mines starting 15 feet ahead. New ones, close to the surface. They laid them fast, maybe even today." That last thought chilled him more than the wind. Private Rowan muttered, "The Krauts could still be around." No one contradicted him. Andrew continued forward. The mud thickened, frost bit into the edges of the tin. His fingers were numb now, but he kept tapping, adjusting angles, listening for small changes, tiny shifts in resonance that could mean the difference between life and obliteration. "It's like he's reading the ground," someone whispered behind him. Andrew didn't hear who. His focus had narrowed to a tunnel. Every sense pulled downward to the soil. He tried not to think of his brother, of the night he received the telegram, of how he had sat in silence with a metal lockbox his brother built for him, tapping it lightly just to feel something familiar. He shook the memory away. Not now. Not here. A faint metallic tremor pulsed through the tin. Andrew froze. This one felt different. Sharper, tighter, like something not just buried but armed and under tension. He whispered, "There's a trigger plate ahead. Don't step anywhere near this mark." He carved a tiny X into the mud. Behind him, Doyle nodded, slowly realizing the scale of what lay beneath them. "They weren't planning to stop infantry," the sergeant murmured. "This is meant to block a supply route. They knew we'd try this path." One of the men cursed under his breath. Andrew resumed his crawl, pushing farther into the dangerous quiet. Then another sound reached him, not through the tin, but through the trees. Footsteps. Soft, cautious, deliberate. The Germans. He lifted his head slightly, eyes narrowing at the shifting silhouettes in the fog. Dark figures flickered between the pines, moving with practiced stealth. At least a half squad. Maybe more. The squad behind him stiffened. Rowan whispered, "They'll see us if we stay put." Doyle's face hardened as he weighed the impossible options. They couldn't retreat, not without crossing the uncharted ground behind them. They couldn't advance, not without Andrew's map of safe earth. And they couldn't fight, not without detonating the mine belt in the chaos. The sergeant crouched close to Andrew. "Keller, how much longer before you can mark us a route?" Andrew swallowed the dryness in his throat. "I need maybe 10 more minutes, sir." "We don't have 10. A shot cracked through the fog, distant but close enough to jolt every nerve awake. German voices murmured, growing clearer. Andrew's pulse hammered. The earth felt alive beneath him, humming with danger above and below. He tapped again, faster now, not sloppily but with sharpened urgency. His ears strained for every nuance in the tin's trembling voice. Silent patch. Mark it. Hollow thud. Avoid it. Trigger tension. Mark wide. He worked with frantic precision, years of childhood habit turning into life-saving technique. His breath fogged the metal. His gloves were soaked and freezing. The forest rustled louder. Behind him, Doyle whispered fiercely, "Keller, they're moving in." Andrew didn't look back. He tapped once more. The ground beneath him answered with sounds so muted, so dangerously wrong, that his entire body froze in instinctive terror. He had found the heart of the mine belt, and the Germans were closing in. The wrongness of the sound reverberated through Andrew's arm like a chill that bypassed flesh and went straight to bone. He didn't need to tap again to confirm it. Whatever lay beneath him wasn't just another mine. It was a cluster, tightly arranged, probably linked by pressure wires or a common trigger system. One mistake here wouldn't just kill him. It would erase the entire squad in a single violent breath. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady the tremor in his hands. The fog around him seemed thinner now, almost fragile, as if the world itself was holding still. Behind him, Doyle crouched lower, eyes scanning between the approaching silhouettes and the young soldier whose palms were pressed flat against the earth. "What is it?" Doyle whispered. Andrew swallowed. "A junction. They planted a series here, maybe 4, maybe 6. Too close together to pick apart from this angle. Can you clear it?" "No, sir, but I can map around it." His voice cracked from the cold, or fear. He couldn't tell which. A shout in German cut through the trees, closer this time. The squad stiffened. Someone flipped the safety on his rifle with a click, so loud it felt like a flare going off. Doyle turned his head just enough to address the men behind him. "No one fires unless you absolutely have to. You hit a mine or force them to run toward us. We're done." The soldiers nodded, though some did so with a hollow look of men preparing for an end they could not fight. Andrew pressed the tin to ground again, angling it carefully away from the junction point. Tap. Listen. Slide. Tap. He mapped the semicircle of safe space around the cluster. Thin, uneven, barely wide enough for a single man to pass without brushing the sensitive ground. His breath misted the tin in fast bursts now. The German voices grew sharper. Twigs snapped. Boots crushed frost. He felt Doyle's tension radiating like heat behind him. The sergeant leaned close and whispered, "Keller, they're sweeping the area. They're going to spot us in less than a minute." Andrew's voice was barely audible. "Tell them to spread low. If they stay grouped, they'll silhouette." Doyle relayed the order. The squad sank even deeper into the landscape, melting into shadows, rifles drawn tight to their bodies. The fog swallowed them. Even Andrew could barely see them now. He shifted left, heart pounding. The tin trembled with each tap. He sensed the edge of the mine belt. A faint shift in the way the vibration expanded. He grasped at that pattern, followed it, carved a tiny trail with the blade of his bayonet. Behind him, Private Huxley whispered, "They're close enough to smell the damn cigarettes on them." A shape moved through the trees, tall, rifle slung, scanning with the rigid discipline of German patrols. Then another figure. Then 3 more. A thin film of sweat formed at the base of Andrew's neck, despite the freezing air. Doyle's whisper came like a knife's edge. "Keller." Andrew didn't look up. Almost, hold on." He slid forward an inch. Tap. The tin gave a faint, clean ring. "Safe." Another inch. Tap. Then a sharp change. Too sharp. He jerked his hand back. "They doubled the line here. We can't go straight." "How far?" Andrew's breath plumed. "We need a detour around this root cluster. Maybe 6 feet to the left." "That'll take too long. It'll kill us if we don't." German voices barked orders. Flashlights flicked between the trees, sweeping arcs of pale light through fog. Andrew ducked instinctively into the mud, smearing frost across his cheek. He forced himself to focus. Tap, listen. Every sense bent toward the ground. His pulse matched the rhythm. He mapped another stretch of earth, marking tiny lines with the bayonet. A narrow path formed, so tight that each man would have to move almost sideways to follow it. But it was real, and it was survivable. He backed up carefully, following his own trail. When he reached Doyle, he whispered, "I've got it, sir." "A route." "Barely, but it's there." Doyle nodded once, his breath fogging between them. In that moment, something shifted, not in the ground, but in the sergeant's eyes. Not respect, not yet, but recognition. Andrew wasn't just a kid engineer anymore. He was the only reason they weren't already dead. A flicker of light swept across the far edge of the clearing and stopped. A German patrolman had spotted movement. He raised his rifle. Doyle's hand snapped to Andrew's shoulder. "Move," the sergeant whispered. "Guide us. Now." Andrew turned toward the darkness ahead, the path he had carved invisible to everyone but him. He tapped the tin once more, found the first safe note, and crawled forward into the teeth of the mine belt as the Germans shouted and the forest erupted with sudden motion behind him. The clearing exploded into noise. Not gunfire yet, but shouts, the pounding of boots, the brittle snap of branches as the German patrol surged forward. Their beams of light cut erratic slices through the fog, sharp and white, like blades searching for something soft to press against. Andrew felt the vibrations of their movement through the ground more than he heard them. Heavy, fast, confident. Go! Doyle hissed. Keller, take us. Andrew slid forward, chest pressed so tightly against the earth he could feel the throb of his own pulse echoing in the mud. His fingers sank into icy soil as he reached for the next safe point he had marked, a faint scrape barely visible in the dimness. He touched it, found it, placed his tin against the ground. Tap. A clean, full ring vibrated through the metal. He signaled with 2 fingers behind him. Safe. Follow. One by one, the men began to crawl after him, moving slowly, carefully, each breath controlled. Their faces were ghostly in the fog, coated with frost and terror. Every shift of weight felt like a sin. Every inch forward was a gamble. Andrew advanced again, angling slightly left to avoid the junction of mines. He tapped, listened, shifted an inch, tapped again. The ground answered him with its strange invisible map. Hollow, solid, trembling, still. His world shrank to those vibrations. The German voices behind them were background noise now, like distant thunder, frightening but irrelevant compared to the deadly silence under his palms. A beam of light swept across the clearing. Andrew froze. The tin slipped slightly in his grip, scraping against a stone. The sound seemed impossibly loud. A German voice snapped sharply. Footsteps shifted direction. Doyle's whisper cut through the tension. Keep going, Keller. Don't stop. Andrew nudged the tin back into place and tapped again. The sound was clean. Safe. He moved. Behind him, Huxley followed, then Rowan, then the rest of the squad in a trembling line. Halfway across the mine belt, the fog thinned just enough for Andrew to see the dark silhouettes moving between the trees. The Germans were now less than 30 yards away. Some crouched as they advanced, some fanned out, rifles ready, searching for shapes in the pale gloom. Andrew's heart climbed into his throat. He tapped again, and the vibration faltered. Wrong. Very wrong. He froze mid-crawl. What is it? Doyle whispered sharply. Wire, Andrew whispered. Below the surface. Tripwire. Probably connected to the cluster. He felt his stomach knot. If someone brushes it, even a sleeve, we're gone. The men behind him stayed perfectly still, their breaths shallow. No one dared shift. Even the fog seemed to pause, suspended in the frozen air around them. Andrew steadied himself. He angled the tin farther left, tapping gently, adjusting until the ground vibrated with the hint of a safe zone. He traced it mentally. Narrow, jagged, barely wide enough for one man to slither through sideways. He slid into the gap, chest scraping the earth. Frost cracked under his ribs. Mud soaked through his sleeves. He felt the faintest tug of underbrush catch his pack strap and stop breathing altogether. A gentle push freed it. Inch by inch he moved forward, carving a path with pure instinct. Behind him, Doyle followed precisely, mimicking Andrew's angles, trusting him completely now. He did not question. He did not hesitate. He simply followed. Then a German shouted, loud, sudden, close. A flashlight beam hit Rowan's boots. The patrol had spotted movement. Down! Doyle hissed. Not that anyone could get any lower. A rifle bolt snapped. Andrew felt panic surge up his spine. He knew what would happen if fighting broke out here. The shock waves alone could detonate the mines. The sudden scatter of men, the flinch of a boot in the wrong direction. It would be over in seconds. He couldn't let it happen. He forced himself to tap again, faster, fiercer, searching for the rhythm that meant survival. The tin trembled in his hand. Safe. Danger. Safe. Close. So close. He crawled the last few feet, rolled behind a low mound of tangled roots. Safe ground. Finally, open enough for the squad to gather. He turned back and waved the men forward, urgency flooding him. Huxley scrambled across, then Rowan, then Clark. Each man moved like a ghost sliding between needles. But the last 3 were still deep inside the belt when the Germans opened fire. Muzzle flashes tore through the fog like lightning. The air shook, the earth trembled. The mines whispered in their sleep beneath the surface. and Andrew knew they were seconds from waking. Gunfire ripped through the clearing in harsh, irregular bursts, carving streaks of light through the fog. Andrew felt each shot like a jolt against his ribs. The ground trembled under the vibration, subtle, but enough to make the buried mind shiver awake, as if the earth itself were warning them that one wrong motion would end everything. The last three soldiers, Vickers, Hale, and Denton, were still entangled deep in the mine belt, their bodies pressed flat, their eyes wide with terror. German bullets cracked into nearby trees, shredding bark, whipping splinters through the air. The patrol had spotted them, and the fog that once shielded them had thinned just enough to betray their shapes. Hold fire, Doyle hissed at his own men, knowing instinctively that returning shots would only worsen the tremors. But the Germans didn't know or didn't care about the deadly carpet beneath the Americans. Their rounds continued with relentless rhythm. Andrew rose into a crouch behind the knot of roots, heart hammering, mind racing. He saw Vickers struggling to shift his boot away from a thin patch of suspicious earth. Hale was pinned behind him, unable to move until Vickers cleared the space. Denton was gripping his helmet, so tightly his knuckles showed white through the grime. The Germans advanced in a staggered line, slow but purposeful, keeping to the trees while training their rifles on the trapped Americans. Andrew felt something inside him snap. He could not let them die because they were a few seconds too slow. He would not let another group of men vanish like his brother had, alone, unprepared, swallowed by chaos that could have been prevented. He grabbed his mess tin and slid back onto his stomach. Doyle caught his arm. "Keller, no. You've done enough. Let me—" Andrew shook his head. "You don't hear it. You'll step wrong." His voice was tight, breathless. "I can get to them." Doyle hesitated, jaw clenched hard enough to crack a tooth. Then, with a tortured nod, he let go. Andrew pushed off the safe patch and slithered back into the maze of unseen death. It fell harder this time, like the ground itself was more volatile, trembling with the percussion of distant shots. Each tap of the tin had to be feather-light, barely more than a brush. Any sudden vibration could awaken the minds prematurely. Tap, listen, tap, shift. He scraped forward until he reached the thin, treacherous path he had mapped earlier. It was barely visible now, his markings smeared by frost or lost in the moonless dim. But he remembered the vibrations. He remembered the angles. He remembered the subtle dance of danger beneath his palms. He reached Vickers first. The man's breath came in short, panicked huffs. "Keller, I can't move. My foot's—" "I know," Andrew whispered. He tapped the earth near Vickers' boot, feeling the muted deadness of metal beneath the soil. He placed his hand lightly over the man's ankle. "You need to shift left. Half an inch. Slowly." Vickers nodded, jaw trembling. He moved. The earth held. "Good," Andrew whispered. "Now slide your knee forward. Yes, just like that." A bullet hissed overhead, slicing through a branch. Andrew ducked instinctively, pressing himself closer to the earth. He reached Hale next. The man looked like he was about to cry. Andrew guided him too, slow, deliberate, as if talking someone down from a cliff's edge. Then Denton. The German patrol had advanced closer now, just 20 yards away. Their voices were sharp, confident. One soldier knelt, raising his rifle to steady his aim. Andrew felt panic surge, but he forced it down. "Not yet. Not until Denton was clear." "Keep your elbow high," Andrew murmured. "Higher there. Don't touch the ground there. See the frost pattern? It's too smooth. Could be a pressure cap." Denton obeyed with trembling arms. A shot snapped into the ground inches from Andrew's boot. The earth quivered. Andrew's pulse roared in his ears. "Move," he whispered fiercely. "All of you crawl. Now." The three men surged forward, following the narrow path he had charted with near-perfect precision. Andrew backed up with them, guiding, signaling, feeling the earth's vibrations like a conductor listening to the first notes of a fragile symphony. They slid past the final cluster, rolling into the safety of the root-covered mound. Doyle grabbed Vickers by the collar and pulled him fully behind cover. But Andrew was still exposed, still halfway in the belt. A German soldier spotted him. He raised his rifle. Doyle shouted, Keller down. Andrew dove backward onto solid ground just as the rifle fired. The bullet struck a patch of frozen soil where he had been seconds earlier, and behind him, from the tremor of that impact, one mine gave a faint metallic click beneath the earth. Not an explosion. A warning. Andrew turned to face Doyle, breathless, mud-coated, shaking. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "They'll keep advancing, and the tremors will set them off." Doyle stared at him, horrified realization dawning. "We need to move the whole squad," Andrew said. "Now." And he was the only one who knew how. The mine belt felt alive now, restless, unstable, like a nest of vipers disturbed one too many times. Even the air seemed charged, vibrating faintly with a threat buried beneath the frost. The German patrol advanced in tight formation, their boots thudding in rhythmic pressure waves Andrew could feel through the ground. Each impact made the earth quiver. Each quiver nudged the mines closer to waking. The squad huddled behind a tangled mound of roots, breath steaming, eyes wide. Some clutched their rifles. Others clutched their helmets. All waited for Doyle to speak. But Doyle didn't look at them. His focus was fixed on Andrew, mud-soaked, shaking, face streaked with frost, but still alert, still listening to the ground like a man tuning an instrument no one else could hear. "How far does your route go?" Doyle whispered. Andrew swallowed hard. "Only halfway. After that, it's uncharted, but I can find the rest." Doyle nodded. "You lead. We'll follow." The weight of it hit Andrew like a blow. Leading the squad meant responsibility far beyond his rank. It meant trusting instincts no one was ever trained to have. It meant guiding 12 men through a thread-thin passage between instant death below and armed enemies above. But he saw their faces. Huxley with his steady hands. Rowan, gritting his teeth. Denton, still trembling. Doyle, holding the entire squad's fate inside his clenched jaw. He couldn't fail them. He wouldn't. Andrew pressed his tin to the ground. Tap. The earth replied with a familiar ring, a safe note, clear and round. He moved forward. The squad formed a single file line behind him, spaced out just enough to avoid adding unnecessary weight to the soil. The fog thickened again, rolling like a slow tidal wave across the clearing. It muffled sound, softened edges, blurred silhouettes. To Andrew, it felt like a cloak, something that hid them from German eyes while exposing them even more to buried danger. He tapped again. Solid. Move. Tap. Hollow. Shift. He angled left. The squad mirrored him. Each man moving with exaggerated caution, bodies low, breath suppressed. Every boot placement mattered. Every inch was a victory. Then German voices barked commands. Flashlights stabbed the fog, sweeping left to right in frantic arcs. A bullet snapped past Doyle's shoulder, embedding itself in a tree trunk with a dull thunk. "Keep down!" Doyle hissed. Andrew didn't dare turn. He tapped again, faster now, pressured by the closing footsteps. His tin trembled with each impact. The earth felt unstable, like the mines were shifting just beneath the surface, sensing the vibrations of combat. Andrew found a patch of safe ground and signaled the squad through. They followed with near-perfect precision. Then the fog betrayed them. For a brief moment it parted, just enough for a German soldier to spot the faint silhouettes moving low across the clearing. He raised his rifle. A shout rang out, sharp and panicked. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through branches, ricocheted off rocks, howled past Andrew's ears. The men flattened instinctively, hands pressed to helmets, boots locked in place. Any flinch could mean stepping off a safe route. Andrew's heart hammered. He lay prone, barely daring to breathe. The tin rested under his palm. He tapped it once. So lightly it was almost nothing. The vibration returned, clean, safe. He whispered, "Keep moving. Don't stop. Follow my marks." The squad crawled as gunfire cracked overhead. German bullets struck the earth behind them, sending splinters of frozen mud into the air. One round hit so close to the mine belt that Andrew felt the ground twitch beneath his chest, as though the mines were stretching awake. "Faster!" Doyle whispered, urgency bleeding through calm. "Keller!" "Fast as you can." Andrew moved with controlled desperation, tapping, sliding, guiding. He could feel the patrol tightening behind him, could sense shadows closing in from flanks. But he also felt something else, the land changing beneath him. The vibrations grew stronger, more natural. The tone deepened. And then, clean earth, solid, undisturbed ground. The end of the mine belt. Andrew rose onto his knees, breath heaving. "We're through," he whispered. "All of us." The squad collapsed into the safe zone, gasping, shaking, stunned. Doyle grabbed Andrew's shoulder, gripping hard. Not in anger, but in something like disbelief. "You got us out," the sergeant breathed. "All of us." Before Andrew could respond, a final burst of gunfire crackled behind them. A stray round ricocheted off a rock, pinging sharply across the clearing. Then the sound hit the mine belt. A deep metallic clank answered, followed by a chain of faint, dreadful clicks beneath the earth. Andrew froze. Doyle froze. Everyone froze. Then a roar tore through the fog. A wall of fire rose behind them. The entire mine belt lit up in a rolling, violent chain of eruptions. The clearing disappeared in flame and soil and shrapnel. The shock wave hurled them forward. And Andrew slammed into the frozen ground, tasted the metallic tang of fear and smoke as the world shook itself apart behind him. The explosion rolled across the clearing like a collapsing mountain, layer after layer of fire, dirt, shattered roots, and shrapnel thrown high into the night. The shock wave hit the squad with crushing force. Andrew felt the world twist sideways. Then darkness swallowed him as he slammed into the frozen ground. For a moment he couldn't breathe. He couldn't hear. His mind throbbed with a deep, ringing pressure, like someone striking a giant metal plate beside his skull. When sound returned, it came in fragments. Muffled shouts, the hiss of settling debris, the crackle of flames licking exposed roots, a distant echo of secondary detonations fading into cold air. Andrew blinked grit from his eyes and rolled onto his side. His chest burned with every breath. But he was alive. That realization took a long breath to land. Someone grabbed his coat and hauled him up. It was Huxley, face smeared with mud, helmet dented, eyes wide with mixture of shock and something close to awe. "You good, kid?" Huxley asked, breathless. Andrew nodded, though the world still wobbled like a loose wheel. Behind Huxley, the rest of the squad was regrouping, shaken, dirt-covered, coughing, but alive. All of them alive. Doyle staggered up from behind a shattered log, wiping blood from his brow, where a flying stone had grazed him. He scanned the squad quickly, counting with trembling fingers. His shoulders slumped in relief when he reached the final number. Then he turned toward Andrew. The sergeant didn't speak at first. His jaw worked, as though wrestling with words that didn't come naturally to him. The firelight from the burning mine belt flickered over his face, softening the usually sharp features with an almost reluctant warmth. "You did it," Doyle said finally, voice low. "You got us through something no manual could prepare us for." Andrew looked at the stretch of earth behind them, now a smoking cratered scar running through the clearing. The mines had torn the ground open like a wound, revealing twisted metal, blackened roots, and the violent geometry of the trap they had narrowly escaped. The path he carved, thin, irregular, almost invisible, was now marked only by churned mud and a few faint scratches made by his bayonet. And there, half buried near the edge of the blast zone, lay his mess tin, scorched, bent nearly in half but unmistakable. He walked to it slowly, picked it up, felt the warped metal vibrate faintly in his hands as it cooled. Doyle approached him. That little thing saved more lives tonight than most men do in a whole war. Andrew didn't answer. He wasn't sure he believed in praise. Not after the guilt he'd carried for months. But as he held the mangled tin, he felt something shift inside him, not erasing the guilt, but reshaping it into something quieter, something steadier. His brother would have understood that. His brother would have told him that saving even one man was a gift. Saving a dozen was a legacy. Denton limped over, helmet askew, still shaking. "We'd have been paced without you. Hell, I wouldn't have made 3 feet. His voice cracked. "Thank you." Rowan added, "I'll follow you through any damn swamp from now on, Keller." Others murmured similar words, awkward but heartfelt. It wasn't ceremony. It wasn't a medal. But it was real, from the Trilene. The remaining German patrol withdrew, unwilling to enter the fiery chaos of the detonated mine belt. Their shapes faded into the fog, leaving the Americans alone with the smoldering ruin behind them. Doyle clapped Andrew's shoulder. Firm. Grounding. We move in 5. That company still needs their ammo. But tonight, he paused, something like pride tugging at the corner of his mouth. Tonight you are the best damn engineer in the Ardennes. They marched out slowly, the squad limping but intact. Dawn crept over the horizon with a pale, exhausted light, revealing the clearing in full, a battlefield transformed into a rough piece of sculpture, jagged and raw. The only gentle thing in the entire scene was the narrow trail Andrew had carved. It wound to the mud in a hesitant zigzag, like the uncertain handwriting of someone trying to steady their hand. The mangled mess tin hung from Andrew's belt now, swinging softly with each step. He touched it once, feeling the warmth fading into cold metal. He knew no one in command would ever hear the full story. No citation would mention echoes in the ground or the thin line between terror and intuition. But the men who would crawl behind him, the men who had lived, would remember. And as the first rays of sunlight stretched across the clearing, catching the faint marks of his path, Andrew Keller walked on with the quiet certainty that sometimes courage wasn't loud or heroic. Sometimes it was a trembling hand on cold metal, a whisper against frozen earth, a decision made in the dark to save those who followed. And sometimes, just sometimes, it left a trail in the mud that no one else could have drawn.